live, as you would say, but this is a new kind of live presentation, so hopefully I won't have much problem with technical difficulties. So for those of you who don't know me, I retired from Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. I can't believe it, 8 years ago already. But I've stayed engaged because of many friends that I wanted to stay in touch with, but also my love of film history. So I've been researching Paramount Ranch along with other locations in the recreation area for now over 20 years, getting a lot of information from the Motion Picture Academy, library, but also institutions around the country as well. And have it's a collaborative effort with some other friends who have very similar interests, and so we share and learn from each other. So a lot of my photos come from a variety of locations, and yeah, we decided we'll kind of hold the questions to the end there, so we can get through it. Hopefully I can get through this and not make it too long, but I'll explain as we go along on this journey. So starting with the image on the screen right now, Carrie Perkins is probably the one person who's going to know quickly what that big box is. That's they referred to as a blimpie. This is the early years of sound, and noisy cameras needed to be muffled in a padded box there. So that's what that's all about. So this is a part one presentation of two, so that because there's so much about the ranch's history, and it's hard for me to even just for a part one to limit images here. So as you can see, we're going to go from 1927 to 1950. So it was 90 plus years ago that the ranch was purchased by Paramount Pictures. Now, how come my screen is not advancing, Riza?
Let's
see. Boy.
Is your arrow on the left-hand corner?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
All right, it's just lagging a little bit.
Yeah. So this is the Paramount Studio newsletter for studio employees that came out in 1927. And as you see, the headline is New Ranch to Make Film Vow on Monday. And over to the right there, it speaks of a huge plot of 2,700 acres of ready-to-use land. And a little harder to see is down the column. It even announces the first film going in production is called Honky Tonk. They changed that title. That was what you call a working title, and we'll actually see that as we go along. So they bought these 2,700, well, it's a little bit more than that, acres for $412,000 back in 1927. So before the cameras could really roll, they had to build an infrastructure, a support area. I mean, besides buildings, water and power there. So of course, this being the movie business, they brought out a contract actress that took people on a tour through photographs for publicity. So that's Mary Bryan, who's standing on the tractor tread there. She went all the way back to silent film. She played Wendy in the silent version of Peter Pan. And of course, the workmen there are all waving, if you will. And you can see some large pipes on the ground there next to the tractor. And up on the hill in the back, it's kind of a little faded there, but that's a water tank. 3 deep wells were dug at the ranch to keep 2 20,000-gallon tanks filled with water. And they brought in the lumber to build the various facilities. These are not for sets. These are for the support facilities and what became known as the headquarters area. And that headquarters area, well, that became eventually the western town that we recently lost, well, almost 2 years ago, I guess. And in the foreground, you can see telephone poles there for running wires as well. So here's one of the first buildings that went up. That's Mary Bryan again there, and this is the caretaker's house. And It stood in what's referred to as the eucalyptus grove. Those of you who are familiar with Paramount Ranch, if you were facing the train station, over to the right is a grove of trees, the eucalyptus trees there, and that's where the caretaker's house was placed. The caretaker oversaw the overall management of the ranch, nothing to do with filmmaking. It was all about just the running of the ranch, electric, water, taking care of the various livestock, fences and on, mowing fields when necessary, all that kind of stuff. That house was taken down in the earliest years of the ownership of the studio, of the Park Service, and being in very poor condition. I'm told. Bonnie, when did you? Oh, you've got a mouthful. I was going to say, Bonnie, when did you start here?
1989.
Okay.
I don't go back that far, Mike.
Yeah. And I'm just pointing out, peeking out over the roof of the caretaker's house, that's Lady Face Mountain. For someone like me who researches, and when I find photos, certainly the one confirmation is going to be if there's a natural landmark that tells me, oh, that's Paramount Ranch. And so you may get bored of it, but you're going to see Lady Face Mountain in the background, a lot of photos here. And the other mountain is Sugarloaf, which I'll also point out. Now, this was the bunkhouse. It was where, I'll say, wranglers stayed, workmen who came out and would stay overnight. This building was very close proximity with what the train station was today. And forgive me, I know there's some folks that are in other parks there are not so familiar with the ranch there. So when I relate locations, I apologize if you're not familiar with them, but this is all within the footprint of where the western town stood. Now, these are the earliest support buildings that were built at the ranch, and there's Lady Face Mountain in the background there, so you're looking towards the north. They built a series of these long buildings for storage purposes, and like the one you see closest to you there, they're open bays, and they would have everything in there from ranch support equipment to even props for movie making. So there might be tractors in there, or there might be buckboards or wagons, whatever. And you can see one of several corrals there to the left. And this is kind of flipping around and looking toward the south. The buildings that I just showed you before, they'd be over the roof to the left of this building here. And for those of you who are familiar with the ranch, that open air building was our pavilion. And the building to the right there also stood up until the fire took it down. And you can tell this is clearly an old photo from those old cars. Forgive me, I never got straight what the Model T versus the Model A, which came first. But anyway, late 20s, early 30s. And this was the building. It was called the Mill. And the mill was essentially the carpentry shop, where they would build everything from large props to actually facades or parts of sets, storefronts, etc. To the left there, that's an incinerator where they would burn trash. And of course, there's Ladyface again. So the next photo is very interesting. I got this photo at Brigham Young University at the Cecil B. DeMille collection. DeMille was a famed director, one of the biggest in Hollywood, known for his spectacles and biblical movies. And this still that was in the collection up there shows the interior of a carpentry shop. And the original building at the ranch there, it was a lot of corrugated metal, just like you see here. And but I've also been told that there was a similar shop on the studio lot. But irregardless, you're getting a peek into what the mill would look like here. Now, one of the great good fortunes I've had is that I've actually found a few production stills from movies that showed the area that was known as the headquarters area, aka later the Western Town. So this is from a 1930s movie called Under the Tonneau Rim. and they used the headquarters area to stand in for like a cattle yard where the ranchers would bring their cattle in for auction. And of course, our pictures are blocking it out a little bit, but the barn, the horse barn there to the right, and the mountains in the backdrop there at the base of them would be where Cornell Road is. So the photographer was essentially standing somewhere around where today's train station is located. Now this is a cropped out portion of a map. Was fortunate through my contacts to find copies of original 1938 drawings of the ranch showing the various sets. So I cropped out certain portions there to highlight sets. So the studio had their own Western town, since the one we know was built in the 1950s, and their Western town, which also had Midwestern street sections, that was north of the ranch that we know today, so in that direction of where Ladyface Mountain would be. So this was essentially shaped like the letter T, a little upside down here, and you see, if you can read where it says Western Street, so that's what that started out as. And anchoring it, so to speak, at the center of the T was the church, which you'll see in the next slide there. And over to the left, there was just really one or two buildings there. One says courthouse, and then the long arm of the T to our right there, that was more of a residential street, which I'll be showing you here shortly. So here's one angle looking down the Western Street, and there's the church that I just referred to. And although they modified the street, just like we've modified our Western town when it stood to fit a particular setting, they did it as well here. So I'm going to flip to the camera angle, so we're looking in the other direction of that same street. So looking up at the other end. And of course, these are scene stills from early movies there. And I like to tell someone when I'm doing my PowerPoint presentations out in various public venues that I know these are valley oak trees in the background because they have no leaves, and so they filmed these scenes in the winter. This first film still I'm showing you here is to there were, of course, many Westerns filmed at Paramount Ranch. They were always extremely popular, but I'm showcasing this particular one because it points out that not only did Paramount utilize the ranch, of course, but it was rented out by other studios. This was a studio known as Pathé, and this is one of the earliest films shot there in 1931. And although you may not visually remember, but the building, it says livery stable, was in the previous photo. It said Kelly's Garage, I think it was. The man who's sitting up there in the driver's seat of this wagon, he was the star of the movie. His name was William Boyd. He went all the way back to the silent era. But in 4 more years, he was catapulted into kind of Western cowboy immortality with a new character that stayed with him for the rest of his life, and that was Hopalong Cassidy. And this is a 1938 film called Bar 20 Justice. The Hopalong Cassidy series started out under Paramount in 1935, but by 1939 or 40, they had moved over to United Artists. So of course, this is the ranch again. Now, in the late 30s, the studio made a decision to erase, if you will, that Western street look. And so this is looking down the street at the church, except the church has been is kind of hidden by a smaller building, and the steeple is taken off the church, but that's it down there. And pretty much just stayed this way. Now, the studio owned this ranch from 1927 until 1943. And so the last of their movies were more, if you will, maybe contemporary middle America movies like Hail the Conquering Hero and Miracle at Morgan's Creek, etc. Films probably many of you aren't familiar with. But I want to point out that as we move on here, actually I'm going to finish showcasing the rest of the town here before I get into this next point. So this is looking, even though we're looking at a different direction, right there is what the church was. So if I put an arrow opposite the other direction, you'd be looking up the street. That was the Western Street. So this is at the base of the center of the T. And so looking to the right over there, you see more buildings that were built to model kind of middle America, or America of the time period there. So where the camera would be, the person taking this picture, if he were to turn around to a 180-degree turn, then you'd be looking down this street, except the church is in the distance off to the right. It's kind of hidden in the trees there. So this was more of a middle America street of, turn of the century, perhaps, one-story clapboard houses, picket fences, wooden sidewalks, plenty of oak trees, as you can see there. So this completes the T. And this is from, of course, a movie production. In 1930 and 31, the studio did back-to-back movies based on Mark Twain's famous novels of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. So this is Tom Sawyer, a child actor by the name of Jackie Coogan, who made probably his biggest debut in film in the silent era in the Charlie Chaplin movie, The Kid. And sitting there on a rock or something, or a log perhaps, that's Huckleberry Finn. So he would essentially be the lead actor in the follow-up movie, or later Huckleberry Finn. So now we're going to segue into that first movie that I alluded to from the newspaper headline, Honky Tonk, but it was changed to Showdown. And so from this point forward, for the next several images, what I'm going to do is highlight what a movie ranch did. A movie ranch's true role was to provide a backdrop for just about any location on this planet Earth we live on, with the exception of maybe in Southern California, the North or South Pole. Although you'll see in a TV show, they kind of drifted in that way at a colder climate. So it could be a setting for anywhere in the world. And this particular setting for the Showdown was in Mexico. And it was, of course, about oil drilling. And you can see there's almost looks like there's a palm tree there to the right of the oil derrick. What I also point out here, and Bonnie, you'll enjoy this, and anybody else who has, loves plants, I found a series of photographs over the years that show what looks like Spanish moss hanging in trees out at Paramount Ranch. Now, okay, this is Mexico. I don't know if Spanish moss grows down that way. Anybody can tell me that, anyway, I've shared this with our lead plant ecologist, John Tisler, and it's a repetitive thing, so it made me wonder. I've never had anybody back me up or tell me, could we have had this type of vegetation in Southern California that has since disappeared with possibly pollution? I don't know.
Mike, we
Yeah.
still sort of have it. If you go a little bit north, I know, like Paso Robles, I can't remember if it's in Ojai. It's not Spanish moss, but it's a species of lichen that's similar and hangs from the trees. I think goat's beard is the common name we use in the West.
That's right.
And it's not too far away to the north. Longpoke, I think I've seen it around there. So it's fairly close. It might even be in Ventura County, but I'd have to look it up. So yes.
It's a very interesting thing about when you're doing research on a particular subject, you just don't know what you're in for, and you might discover something, like I did with all of this, hanging in the trees that you don't see anymore. So now we've gone from Mexico to Africa. Those who are familiar with the Tarzan series, of course, Tarzan first came to film in the silent era, and by an actor named Elmo Lincoln. But they're really probably just like Sean Connery is probably the most notable James Bond to a lot of people. Johnny Weissmuller would forever be to most people, the real Tarzan. And then an actress, Maureen O'Sullivan, as Jane. Well, I don't know how the studios got away with it, you know, copyright or patent or whatever, but they twisted around, and Paramount introduced their own version of Tarzan. The movie was called King of the Jungle, and but of course they didn't call him Tarzan. His name was Caspa, the Lion Man. And his Jane is Frances D., who in real life was married to Joel McCrea, who were longtime residents as well as actors who lived here in Thousand Oaks on a ranch that's now partially preserved as the McCrea Ranch. And yeah, well, Lady Face is back again, and this is the set that was used for the King of the Jungle, an African thatch hut set on. And this is actually on the northernmost property of our Paramount Ranch today, what we call a North Phase. And now we've moved over to the Philippines for a 1934 movie, Come On Marines. So you see we're taking a kind of a journey around the world, if you will. Now, there were a number of sets that stayed a little longer than others. Some were just quite temporary. Sets are always really meant to be temporary. The church that stands out at Paramount Ranch now, you can tell that that was built to be temporary because it's already showing within a few years that its paint is peeling and the thin materials they use are not lasting. So this was a stockade fort that was built at the ranch on property that's now under the Park Service. And again, the studio was bringing out actresses to take you on a tour. And so these are two actresses, Eleanor Whitney on the left and Frances Farmer on the right. And Frances Farmer we'll see again. So to showcase the fort in one movie, at least the interior, this is a movie called Fighting Caravans from 1931. And the man there is Gary Cooper. And Gary Cooper was one of Paramount's biggest male stars, and probably the one male star who made the most appearances out at Paramount Ranch, beginning with the Virginian in 1929. I've thrown this still in for two reasons. One, in the background, you see the stockade fort. This is, those of you again are familiar with Paramount Ranch, if you drive in the main entrance, this would be off to your right. The woman who's on the horse, or the young girl, her name is Marjorie Bodkin, and she was the daughter of the assistant ranch manager at Paramount Ranch, Richard Bodkin. And over the years, I've had the good fortune of meeting people who were descendants of folks who actually worked at the ranch. And so the granddaughter, Joanna, excuse me, she showed up at the ranch one day early on my time at the park, and she eventually shared these family photos, and I scanned them. So luckily they're scanned, so they didn't get lost in our fire at the Rocky Oaks archives. Now we're going to move on to a set that was quite permanent, stood for probably at least 10 years, I would guess. I don't always know when the set was built or came down, unless I can find some firm documentation, but this is referred to as the Hacienda set. If you had a park brochure, or you're just familiar with the park over in what the area called Witch's Wood, this is where the Hacienda set stood, and you can still see the contours of land that were altered for this kind of terraced structure here. Later on, many years after that, the Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman were allowed to build their little small house and barn in the same location. Remember that arch? It's going to show up in another slide here in a moment, but this set could be Mexico, Spain, Portugal, South America, because it just fit that Spanish speaking parts of the world, if you will. So to showcase at least one movie that used the Hacienda set, I selected this one because the gentleman on the left is quite well known around here. Does anybody, well, of course I'm asking a question here, so I'll just say who it is. That's Leo Carrillo. And he certainly was a character actor and well known with many movies in Hollywood history. And of course, with his heritage, he fit well into any of these movies with Spanish, Mexican backdrops, if you will, storylines. And so this movie was Broken Wing. The park has his name, bears his name here, Leo Carrillo State Park and Beach, because he went on to become one of the state park commissioners in California's history. So here's the same fort again. There's the arch to the right, looking a little bit in a different direction. And off there in the background, the base of the mountains there, that would be where Cornell Road is, just to give you a little orientation. This is Sutter's Gold, taken from the true history of the gold rush era and Captain Sutter. And this is one of the movies of that Hollywood tinkered a lot with, and so it really twisted the history, I'm told. In fact, I'm reading a book I got online about California's early history that was published in the 1920s, I think it was. I got online, and it's really been fascinating to read about the early history, and especially Sutter and Sutter's Fort there. This is another studio. This is Universal, and I actually found this movie as being shot at Paramount Ranch at my annual film festival, Cinecon. They showed this movie, had no idea it was filmed, and all of a sudden I recognized the set. Bingo, another movie for the list. Now this is one of the fun things I like doing, is comparing then and now. So this is from the movie Sutter's Gold. Of course, the film still to the left there. That's Captain Sutter. The actors, Edward Arnold, the actress there is Binnie Barnes. So that tree, it's a valley oak, and it stood there for many, many years. The movie was from the 1930s. Unfortunately, the drought caused the large limb in the picture to the right, and the large limb on the left of the picture on the right, it broke off, and then the fire sadly took down the rest of the tree. But during its natural history, if you notice Sutter or Arnold's hand and forearm are resting on the tree there, so that limb he has his hand on, well, it was here at one time, and it sometime broke off between then and when I took this picture there. But if you look above his head, there's a little knob. I had to look this up. It's often referred to as a callus. So a branch had been there at one time and had broken off, and over time it had healed over to this raised like knob, if you will. So we'll go back over to the sort of now picture, and there it is right there. So putting two and two together, this is the tree that was there at the Hacienda set. So we go on to this photo here. Also from the 1930s, Rose of the Rancho, and then there's that little callus on that same limb right there. So this is from 1940, Dr. Cyclops. It's a kind of classic story of the mad scientist. I discovered this film because one of my film history colleagues, Mark Wanamaker, who owns Bison Archives, has thousands, if not millions, of film stills, and I help identify some of them that are identified. And in this next photo here, there was no title on it, but if you notice, there's a number down in the bottom right-hand corner, and both Mark and I have these publications like volumes 1, 2, and 3 that have listings of those production numbers. So this says 1932 and on there, and it's not the year, or is it 1832? But anyway, I looked up in the book and found this was Dr. Cyclops. So another corner, the Hacienda set, if you were looking at the original side we were looking at before, and you just did 180 turn, this would be what had been behind you there, a series of one-story structures there. It was all enclosed plaza, if you will. And what's interesting is in the movie, the setting was South America, below the Andes Mountains. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the term called matte painting, what the studio would do, they had painters they would hire, and they would paint a landscape, that would be requested. So they said, okay, paint us a broad landscape of the Andes Mountains. And then they might, what they will do, they'll splice it into the film. Carrie Perkins could elaborate on this much better than I could. So when you see this movie, you don't see those oak trees in the background. What you see is a matte painting showing the Andes Mountains. So this shot was at the beginning of the movie and at the end, where these other scientists had come to South America at the behest and invitation of this scientist, not knowing that he had gone mad. And he attracts them to his jungle laboratory with his gamma ray gun, and he shrinks them down to miniature little people about the size of our fingers. So that was Dr. Cyclops. Now I'm going to jump back to the headquarters area where our western town that most of us know was located. This is yet another movie where they used the headquarters area, and the long building in front of us there, that was the horse barn, which had been rebuilt during the NPS ownership, but still retained the same look. But what's interesting is off to the left there, that's our witness tree that gained a lot of fame and notoriety, and that sadly had to come down because it was literally baked on 3 or 4 sides by set structures that just sealed its fate, unfortunately. So back in 1934, it was a fairly still, then it was a decent sized tree. And a little bit more close up of that tree, seeing one of the twin trunks here from a 1935 movie, Code of the West. And if you remember, I pointed out Jackie Coogan as Tom Sawyer. Well, this is him as an older man, probably in his early 20s in this movie, Code of the West. So you see the horse barn behind the tree and Jackie Coogan. So in traveling further outside of the United States, on our park map brochure is a landmark location as Marco Polo Hill, and this comes from The Adventures of Marco Polo, a 1938 movie. And yet another studio or production company, Samuel Goldwyn Productions, came to Paramount and asked to rent a portion of the ranch to build this fortress. So this was ultimately set to be 13th century China, and of course the story of Marco Polo traveling from Italy to China. And so this fortress was built there. It was quite large in size. I don't have any dimensions to throw out to you. But an interesting footnote is that they intended for this to be shot in Technicolor, which was around back then, and it's very early years. I think it was 1935, one of the first Technicolor movies to come out. Unfortunately, I guess there wasn't a lot of Technicolor equipment, cameras available at the time, and so they weren't able to do that. And this was ultimately, it came out in a sepia tone print. Well, the studio decided to just have the set stay. They didn't require to be torn down because they thought, they went to all this trouble to build this set on their property, and negotiations and all. So it stayed at least for another year, and it was transformed into a Foreign Legion fort, North Africa setting. And I, again, like at Cinecon, watching Sutter's Gold, this time I was sitting at home watching this movie on television when all of a sudden there's Ladyface Mountain in the background. So bingo, another movie for the list. Pictures, natural features don't lie. And there it is up there, the little knob that stands out as the probably the key feature. Also, on the ranch was a set built for the filming of Morocco. Now you've seen a lot of these movies in the 1930s because the 30s were the key decade, the filming of the ranch. They got it rolling just about the beginning of 1930, 1929, and again by the early 40s, they were beginning to phase out and eventually sell the ranch. So you're seeing, of course, a lot of movies from the 1930s. So that's Gary Cooper back again, and Marlene Dietrich is the leading lady in the movie. And of course, this is the movies, but he's successfully holding her back while he fends off these two attackers. I don't know if you can do that in real life, but in the movies you can. So how did I know this was at the ranch? Well, at the Motion Picture Academy, I found what they call set reference photo, in this case, this particular one. And that's the set they were on. Now, you can't see this very clearly, but that little black square, a slate in the bottom sitting on the ground is what you would see in a set reference photo. Set reference photos are largely documentations of a set without any people in it normally. So if for some reason that set was altered, changed, and they had to refilm a scene there, then they had a set reference still to make sure that they could put everything back together again in the correct place. So I used good old Photoshop, and I cut out that slate. Whoops, wrong way. And there. So at the bottom it says ranch, if you can all see that. So bingo again, I know it's Paramount Ranch. Now, I put this in here not only because Cecil B. DeMille was the most noted director in Paramount and possibly in Hollywood with his grand spectacles and biblical dramas, but this has been one of the most elusive films for me to feel 100% comfortable that it was shot at Paramount Ranch. It first came to light when I bought a studio promotional booklet that unfortunately got lost in the fire at Rocky Oaks in our archives. But in it stated that they shot scenes of Rome burning while Nero fiddled at Paramount Ranch. It's also mentioned in a biography of DeMille, but I've never yet found the definitive photographic evidence, at least, to back that up. I learned in the Park Service working at historic sites that try to always have at least two sources to confirm a historical fact. And I know I've been challenged sometimes on some, but I do my best. So what I'm going to do quickly here, this is a 1932 movie, and that's DeMille sitting there to the left below the camera. So you see there's some vegetation in the photograph here, but I want to go to this next photograph here, and Frederick March is the star on the right. The leading lady, Lisa Landy, is in the middle there, and that's a Roman guard, I suppose, if you will. But over that to the right of that, the guard's helmet there, there's a branch sticking out. Bonnie, I need you here. You shouldn't be leaving when I'm talking about vegetation. But anyway, I'm going to zoom in a little bit there. And even though it's a little out of focus, boy, it sure looks like Coast live oak leaves. And so I'm going to go to another photo here. Same, film scene, different angle, if you will. So behind the Roman soldier. Okay, Bonnie, I'm glad you're back here. I'm going to go back real quick. Bonnie, I'm showing that this branch here looks very suspiciously like Coast live oak leaves, even though it's out of focus. But if you go to this here, Coast live oaks versus valley oaks, the two dominant oak species in the Santa Monica Mountains. The Coast live oaks, when they're nice and healthy and big, it's a very dense crown. You can't see much daylight through it, whereas valley oaks you can. So here you see what could possibly be a valley oak. A Coast live oak. So they could be at the ranch. Now here's another film still I got at the Motion Picture Academy, and supposedly this is Rome, a street in Rome, but way in the background there, I'll circle it. You see kind of a dense canopy, which could be a Coast live oak. So I'm getting very close, and so I'm not going to say yes for sure, but I believe, all of these help take me toward, what's been written in print that this may have been shot at the ranch. And one last shot along that line. This was a set, and this is again a series of publicity stills with these two actresses visiting the ranch. That studio map that I showed you in that cutout of the original Western town earlier on. Unfortunately, it didn't show sets that were built at the ranch prior to 1938 that had been taken down. And this is one of those sets that didn't appear on any of those four maps. And I can't, this was in the caption, I think on this said this set was somewhere in sort of you know, the area of Ukraine, the Stans, those various countries over there. But this could have been a street set, if you see, that could have been modified for this. It has that similar curve, if you will, except I think there's a valley oak in the background there. Anyway, it's just trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together. So unfortunately, if I'd known that our images of us would be to the right, I wouldn't have put the letters on, you know, the text on the right here. But this is another set at the ranch. Was built in the early 30s. Earliest I know of is Broken Lullaby, 1932. And it's essentially a period European set that in this case was Germany. And so we're going to go to another film that used that set. And this is Hotel Imperial from 1939. And the star of the movie was an actor named Ray Milland. In the background, making an appearance is Sugarloaf. But we're going to take a step back outside the town from a photo I found in the LA Public Library collection. Looks sort of like maybe, you know, not the best of condition, but that is the set. Broken Lullaby, Hotel Imperial out at the ranch there. And again, for those who are familiar with the ranch, when you drive in the main entrance to your right, it would have been off in the fields over there. In fact, behind this set would be Medea Creek and then the mountain, you know, so you're sort of looking west, if you will. Maid of Salem. Now we've gone to Salem, Massachusetts, 17th century, those Salem, you know, witchcraft trials and all. The actress is Claudette Colbert. The actor is Fred McMurray. Maid of Salem, 1937. And so this set stood right next to that German European street set, and you'll see on a map in a little bit here in comparison and proximity and all. So this was the Salem, Massachusetts set. Now, curiously, I don't know why yet. I've gotten a lot of written materials from the studio to help, you know, tell me this, but why they did this, I don't know. They had two Salem, Massachusetts sets, this one at Paramount Ranch and one in Santa Cruz, California. And I'm reading up on the real Santa Cruz, the real Salem, Massachusetts. There are actually two villages back in Massachusetts at one time. So anyway, center front there is a distinctive tree, a valley oak, and you see it has sort of like a V notch in it. And although my next picture, the angle I took is a little off, it's not directly on, but if you notice the hill, kind of a level ridge line to the right, and then you see, you know, the Santa Monica Mountains main ridge lines to the right there. So here you are, and there's that tree. And off to the right, to the left there's trees obscuring it, but that's that ridge line that was relatively smooth, and there's the rest of the Santa Monica Mountains there. And this is the off to the left there. It's hard to see, but that's the road coming into the park. So that same area cropped out of one of the studio maps that I got through Mark Wanamaker. First of all, that's Cornell Road there, where the arrow's pointing. This is the Marco Polo set, also AKA Beau Geste. So immediately north of us, or the top of the screen, out of sight, would be where our, you know, studio, where our known Western town that we lost in the fire would have been. So you'd be looking to the south at the top of the photo here, and that's the the German European street set, and right next to it literally is the Salem, Massachusetts set. So it's all about camera angle. You know, that they wouldn't show one intruding in on the other, if you will. If you remember Frances Farmer, I pointed out one of those two actresses that were in the photos showing you different sets. So she was the co-star in this movie Ebb Tide, based on Robert Louis Stevenson's short story. And of course, many of his stories were set in the South Pacific. So the South Pacific came to Paramount Ranch. And this is the set that they built out there. It was a South Sea Village. Right behind the set was Medea Creek, or is Medea Creek here. And this was in the late 30s again. They also filmed out at Catalina, where they also had another village set. So similar to the Maid of Salem, they had two villages at two different locations. But that's not unusual. That's just what they did in Hollywood. And lots of palm trees brought in to give you that sense that you were not in Southern California proper with this, although we have palm trees, of course, but to help you think you're in the South Pacific. Now we're going to transition back to the United States. This is Wells Fargo, made in 1937. It starred Joel McCrea and Francis D., who I had mentioned earlier, both actors for their entire lives and careers in Hollywood. It's golden age. A real-life married couple. So they didn't have a far commute, I guess, to get to this set here. So the studio actually built two versions of San Francisco. This one is 1849 San Francisco, kind of that gold rush era. I always got a kick out of, you know, in a lot of old Westerns, they always showed streets as real muddy. I guess it's just to bring it more to life, as, you know, textural type of feel. And anyway, that's again Ladyface showing up in the background, very helpful for location, built on the side of a hill. But this was a telling of Wells Fargo's early history. So in the movie, Joel McCrea and Francis D. aged over time. So it started off kind of with the Stagecoach, Pony Express lines days, and eventually, as Wells Fargo became more and more successful and established a home base in San Francisco, and as the story went on, San Francisco moved on into the 1860s, and so a totally separate set was built nearby. These are some 50+ buildings, mostly all facades. And this is all on Paramount Ranch property that's not under the National Park Service. It's developed now with homes, but this is 1860s San Francisco. And again, one of my film location colleagues, it was like two heads, in this case 4 or 5 or 6 are better than one, because we're all out there finding stuff. You'll see in a moment a beautiful color photo, but first I want to show, this is the building of that Western town set. You don't see a lot of it there yet, but we're looking south, and that's Sugarloaf Mountain, kind of slipped in between two ridge lines, if you will. But look at this beautiful color photo that a friend found online, and it actually had a big watermark, but he's very good with Photoshop, and he got it out of there. So this is a very rare find, and I hope you're not getting bored of seeing Ladyface Mountain showing up again and again. So I think this might be one last cutout here of another map. So we're seeing all the way at the bottom is the Ebb Tide set, and above it you're seeing the San Francisco sets. The larger one is at the very topmost, and then the smaller one is down kind of midway. And then off to the left, it says Swiss Village, a set for another film setting. So that's Ebb Tide down there in the very bottom. And that's the San Francisco set of 1849. That's the one of 1860s. And that's the Swiss family, or Swiss Village. And that's Medea Creek, separating it all. So we're moving now into the 1940s, toward the close of the era of Paramount Pictures ownership. This is a really standout film. I especially enjoyed promoting this film here. You know, many movies were made back decades ago, highlighted various illnesses, conditions, stereotypes, you know, some regrettable in today's world. But this was a very standout film that resonates even more so today in our world, in military life and people being deployed overseas in combat zones. So Proudly We Hail is the story of the nurses in World War II in the South Pacific, in Corregidor and the Bataan Peninsula, Corregidor being an island. And of course, the Japanese invaded the Philippines and down to Bataan and Corregidor and all. And these nurses had to evacuate in real life, as in the movie here. And these are three major actresses at Paramount, from left to right: Paulette Goddard, in the center, Veronica Lake, and to the right is Claudette Colbert, and she was the leading lady, probably the highest paid of the three there. And in the movie, after, you know, in real life, understandable, where they're fighting to save the lives of wounded soldiers that are being brought to these field hospitals, you know, you can relate even to the COVID-19 days in hospitals and the emotions that nurses and other medical personnel have to go through when people are, you know, literally, you know, close to and are going to die, the emotions involved. And so Claudette Colbert's character suffers what was not spoke of in the movie as a term, but, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. And it is really quite a powerful movie. So if you ever have the opportunity to come across it, do watch it. So we're going to jump quickly up in the 1950s. For I think this might be the one last 50s movie here. And this is Bwana Devil. And it's about a lion that unfortunately is wandering off into villages in Africa and, you know, killing villagers. And so another period picture where you put your actors in period costumes, tell them it's Africa, and sure enough, looks like an African savanna. And it's hard to see, but in the middle of these natives here, there is a real African lion, probably quite tame, I would hope. So that's for people who know the ranch. We're looking to the north. Behind the person who took the picture would be Cornell. And out there, kind of where that light colored dry grass ends, where you see the first trees begin, that's where Medea Creek would be. Way before it became more of a permanent stream with the development of homes and agora, and all the willow trees came in later. So just to close out here with this film, Bwana Devil, what's very interesting about it is it's one of the earliest 3D movies of the 1950s. And this gives you a rare look of a 3D camera here. And so that's it right there. And there are actually two 3D cameras placed next to each other at a distance, emulating the eye-line positioning used to shoot each scene there. I didn't highlight it, but off in the background, that's Sugarloaf. And the lead actor is Robert Stack, who would go on in the, I guess, the 1960s. It would have been to a greater notoriety as Elliot Ness in that TV show. So as we close out part one here, I'm going to show you the headquarters area, again, as the studio called it, before it was turned into a Western town set. So these, you know, fortunately, you know, have this photo that is so valued to be able to show the entire headquarters area of what became the Western town. So I'm going to circle the build, you know, most of the buildings here. So first of all, that's the horse barn, and right in front of it, kind of hard to see, but there's a corral there, and then there's another couple of corrals off to the left, and actually there's three of them there. And then right there, that's the bunkhouse, which would be in proximity to where today's train station still stands. Then way off to the right there is the eucalyptus grove where the caretaker's house would be. So we're looking to the west, essentially. Over here is the mill, the carpentry shop. And then lastly, a building I hadn't highlighted up until now, the dining hall and kitchen where everybody was fed. Off to the left of the mill, there was a sash and door shed building and also a stone and gravel bank. And it was also where they had their lumber yard, if you will. Now we're going to drop down a little bit more to eye level. And so there's the mill, the carpentry shop, and you see the smokestack, if you will, popping up there, the incinerator. And then you see the row of buildings there, the various prop sheds, and at the very back you see the bunkhouse peeking out, if you will. And also right there, the witness tree. So this is probably very early 1950s, before private ownership came in and changed it all. And that would have been William Hertz. William Hertz, well, let me back up. Esser Wickholm was the man who bought Paramount Ranch from the studio. And, but he then subdivided those 2,700 acres into smaller parcels, maybe 200-300 acre parcels. And so a man named William Hertz, who was a dentist, and formed a corporation called the Hertz, Land Company, I think it was, something like that. And he purchased 336 acres of subdivided land out of the ranch for the price of $69,000. And that was in January of 1954. So this is what Hertz did to the central part of the headquarters area. So this is your first earliest look of what the ranch looked like, the western town that many of us have come to know over the years. So you're looking to the west. The tree is hiding Ladyface again there in the background. But to the left is the hotel that was built by Hertz right there. And then storefronts, facades were put on all the other buildings there to the right. So those are the various prop sheds, etc. Way down where it narrows out and you can't see much, there's actually facades there. That's where the bunkhouse would have been down there. So flipping around in the other direction of the same set. So the person who took the camera, took the picture, would have been standing at the other end of the street here. So it's been flipped around. So now you're looking toward Cornell Road toward the east in the background there. And see where they put up some more facades. Where those facades are directly ahead during the NPS period of time, they built a residence on the left and then another set, if you will, structure on the right. And one of the last images here I'm going to show you, this is the bunkhouse, and Mr. Hertz said, or a production company had put a facade up on one end of it and then another facade, single standing at the far end there. And that guardrail you see peeking out on the right, well, that had all to do with what became known as the racetrack, which I will speak more about in part 2 whenever I'm rescheduled. And also the demise of the bunkhouse, which is very fascinating. So in closing out, at least the Hertz period I'm showing you, unfortunately, I wish I'd known that these pictures of us would be to the right. It's hiding the lettering there. But anyway, many TV Westerns were drawn out to the ranch. This was the heyday of early television and a plethora of TV Westerns. So the Cisco Kid, which ran from in the 1950s solely, I think it was 1950 to 56, starred Duncan Ronaldo on the right as the Cisco Kid, and back again as Leo Carrillo, as Pancho on the left there. And they're in our western town built by Mr. Hertz there. Another Western TV show was Bat Masterson with Gene Barry, and I will confess this is not our Western town, but it is a Western town. I'm not aware of where it is, but it's the only photo I could find showing Gene Barry there. But we've confirmed it. Don Bitts, who is on this Zoom with us all, he's been watching over the years a lot of these TV Westerns, and I know he's documented, I think it's 16 or 17 episodes of Cisco Kid at the Ranch, and much less for Gene Barry and Bat Masterson, but I've actually watched 1 or 2 myself, and I've actually found some photographs to back it up. Hotel de Paris was a short-lived Western filmed at the ranch. That's the hotel there, built by Hertz in the background. And the star of the movie with the big puff of smoke in front of his gun going off is Earl Holliman, who may be known to some of you as a co-star in the I don't know, it was the 1980s, I want to say, a Policewoman with Angie Dickinson. And this is Klondike, 1960-61, short-run show. And if you remember at the very beginning, I talked about Paramount Ranch stood in for just about any place in the world except those colder climates. Well, they snuck in Skagway, Alaska for the setting of this. But I like to joke they must have, meant it to be in the summer when they filmed the episodes. So there's the hotel again, off to the left for the western town. And this is a little different view with not so many people in it. So we're looking up the street toward to the west, if you will. And in our last TV show, one of the most frustrating one is a lot of writers put out in print and even in documentaries, perhaps, in this case, relating to Paramount Ranch. The Riflemen, Have Gun Will Travel, Wanted Dead or Alive, Gunsmoke, all shot out at Paramount Ranch. Some of that may be true. You have to watch a lot of episodes to confirm it. Don and I so far have only found one episode of Gunsmoke over the 20 years that they ran. And there's still many episodes to be watched. And this is out at Paramount Ranch. They never shot in the town, but they were out on NPS property. And actually in the background, you would be looking toward Cornell Road there. And that's, of course, Matt Dillon, James Arness, and Chester and Doc off to the left there. So we're still watching a lot of the old TV Westerns, but we can't say yet that any of others have been actually filmed out at the ranch. Now, in closing out the presentation, I'm just showing you one of the flyers. We have a couple of them, and luckily, the son of Mr. Hertz had donated some of his collection tied to the ranch. Sadly, all of that tangible collection was lost in the fire, but some things did get scanned. And so this advertises the ranch, as you can see, available for civic organization, private clubs, youth groups, and of course, when it became the Paramount Sportsman Ranch, advertised much the same way. So we're ending here at the sort of 1954-ish, if you will. Hertz sold the ranch in a little less than 2 years to a group of businessmen, and they renamed it the Paramount Sportsman's Ranch, and that's where we'll pick it up whenever I get rescheduled, if I get good reviews anyway for this one. So until next time, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That was amazing.
I'm going to hit stop share, right?
You can stop sharing your screen. We're
okay.
Recording. There are a few questions. I'll let Lay skim the chat box real quick for that. Just a quick reminder for everybody. I just added the link of all of our recordings on Samo Fund's YouTube channel on the chat bar. You could always just go directly to YouTube and search Samo Fund, and you should be able to see the Samo Fund icon, and you click on that and look at their videos tabs, and that'll show you all the videos we have hosted. They'll be represented there. But if anybody has any questions for Mike, this is the opportunity. And again, Mike, thank you so much. That was
sure. Now it's time to stump a ranger or put me in a difficult spot. Go ahead.
All right, I see in the chat, one of the questions is, why did Paramount sell the ranch?
That's a good question. It's a period. What are you putting your finger out there, Carrie? Well, I'll preface one thing saying is that, well, of course, this was World War II era when they sold it. I've read accounts where, of course, there was rationing going on. Things were difficult. They lost their studios, lost their European markets, of course, belt tightening and all this. And, Paramount was really the first major studio movie ranch that had been built. After that was the Warner Brothers Ranch that's over near, was near the Motion Picture and Television Home today. And of course, 20th Century Fox, which is now Malibu Creek State Park, that was built later. And they lasted a little bit longer. But I know Paramount was, I read in newspaper articles that they were tearing down sets so they could repurpose the wood for other sets. It was just that time in American history and all. And of course, eventually, the theater chains that the studios owned would be broken up too as a monopoly. So, it was all about finances and decisions being made. And I don't carry you or showing your finger out there.
That's what I was saying. There's only one thing that motivates studios to do anything, and that's money.
Yep. Yeah, right.
When they're losing it, they go away.
Yeah. Thank you. Very point. Yeah, right. There's throughout the history of filmmaking, especially during the studio days, it was a real tug of war and many arguments because you had the money side, the people who were, this was a business and they were making money off it. The studio, the people in the case in Paramount and other studios, they had their main offices in New York City. But then you had the creative people, and the creative people didn't want the money people messing with them, but they were always doing that, to save money. You can't do that. You can't build that set. We can't hire that actor. They're too costly, and so. The poor directors, who are often the artistic directors of the film, I can't imagine, the stress that was put upon them and lost tempers. Okay.
Oddly enough, art and money often clash.
Yeah.
All right. I do not see any other chat questions. So if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question directly, that's entirely up to you.
Mike, I was just gonna say, did you see my comment I wrote about the oak trees?
Where?
No,
Oh,
he didn't see him, Bonnie.
Oh, that's what I sent to you privately, accidentally.
Yes.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry. So your theory with the oak trees is a good theory. I just don't know what other filming may have been happening at other studios in LA County and Ventura County, but both kind of oaks exist at those ranches too. So I couldn't tell you when you referred to me with that question.
Yeah, I know you stepped out of the camera, you stepped away when I started with that one film, Sign of the Cross. So you may have missed a little bit of what I'd said there, but I had talked about, I essentially am not 100% confident yet that they filmed that scene that's been written by the studio in a promotional booklet. It's known that studios did step outside the realm of truth, but in that case, I don't know why they would, misrepresent that. So, I'm leaning more heavily toward that movie Sign of the Cross being filmed out there. And so I was pointing out what, could very likely have been coast live oak leaves and, the dense canopy of the trees and all. And so anyway, that just, it just showed, I wanted to highlight the challenges of, film research, just like when you do genealogy. You can, find something that makes you think you found a family member when maybe in reality it's not.
Well, thank goodness you still have a lot of research to do on that then.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I can't wait till we all get a vaccine. I can go back to the libraries when they open.
Mike, it's not so much of a question, it's just an observation that between COVID and CGI and the way of technology, that what the era that you captured is something that will never be again. And it's great to have that in this community for people to appreciate.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm at a stage in my life that I'm ready to throw in the towel, but I begin to think about safekeeping of all this. I've already, all of my electronic files have been sent over to NPS, and but I keep adding to it, so I have to update them. But I have, tangible files as well as, electronic. I mean, I don't think I'll ever scan every paper document I had, but I may be donating my collection to the Motion Picture Academy. I'm in the early stages of discussing that with them. So, is anybody hearing me?
Yeah, but somebody's
okay.
sharing their screen, and I don't know who it is.
They shouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to keep people any longer here. If you have any more questions or whatever.
I just would like to mention that whenever we do get our programs back, I had started up the Paramount Ranch tours again before the COVID thing happened. So I'll continue those as soon as we can start up again. And I found that I had a lot of angst about, well, how am I going to talk about stuff that isn't there? And what I came up with was you can burn down the town, but you can't erase the history.
Yeah.
We're still standing in the middle of it, so let's talk about it.
Yep, that's exactly what I say. It may be the tangible reminders are gone, but the history remains forever. And before we close out, I want to, for those who don't know, Don Bitts, who's there, I can see on the screen. Don is gonna hopefully be my co-presenter when we do part 2. So hello, Don, and we'll be working together in the near future to figure that out. So anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed it. It's been my pleasure. Hopefully it's my first time Zoom. I didn't do too bad.
You did fine.
Thanks, Riza.
You're great.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
everybody for joining. Thanks, Mike, again. That was amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mike. It was terrific.
You can
Thanks,
always
Mike.
contact me by my email or cell phone that Riza or Lay will give to you. I'll let them be the filters of handing out my personal information. All right.
All right.
All right.
Mike.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Mike.
Soon. Bye.